Alrighty. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and begin. I know we're a little bit behind time, and so our next agenda item that you have before you is proposed changes to transportation and charter contract. Before they start, I want to remind the board that if you remember earlier in the year, we had the drivers that came and they had some concerns. So we have held meetings. I held a meeting with a group of drivers and area managers. Von Belcher and Rob Davis have been holding meetings with them to find out what are the concerns, how can we make it better for them, and what some of their suggestions that they have. So what you're going to hear is coming information that came out of those meetings and after they research what they proposed to them. So I want to now turn it over to Rob Davis and Von Belcher, and when John Hill comes back, and he's been working with them as well.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd, and thank you for this opportunity to discuss the elimination of charter school transportation by the school district. At one point, the school district provided transportation for just about all the charter schools. And over the years, as charter schools increased and resources in the district decreased, we had to put charter schools on notice that they had to provide their own transportation. And currently we're in that situation again. So, you know, most of those charter schools that did start their own transportation have been very successful and to provide a great service to their students. The district did keep the smaller charter schools, but we're at the point now where with the lack of resources, the lack of drivers, that we need to do something to remedy that, and that's coming very loud and clear from our area managers and our school bus drivers. So, you know, prior to every school year, we review and discuss ways we can improve the district service to the school transportation services to our district schools. And so one of those is by eliminating some services that aren't required by the school district. Also, due to the shortage of drivers, we're having a difficult time getting students to school on time. And when we do that, they're missing instruction time. And so by eliminating some of these services, we feel that we can get the students there in time for breakfast and in the seats so that they're maximizing their instructional time. Just to give you some statistics, the 31 charter schools that receive transportation, 21 provide their own transportation services for 7,000 students. The district transports 350 students at 12 different charter school sites, and we utilize 90 buses. Now, understand those 90 buses are transporting district school students as well during the same period of time, but the reason that's important is to show how widespread charter school students are, and it takes 90 buses to get them into the locations that they need to be. We are currently 28 driver positions short, which is about 5.5% of the total driver population. We've come a long ways. We were close to 70 at the start of the school year, so we've been chipping away at that very heavily. Florida statute covers charter schools in 1002.33. You know, based on the information that I obtained in the statute, there are services that the district has to provide or the sponsor has to provide, and charter school transportation for charter school is not one of those services that they have to provide. Now, what they do have to do is we have to make sure that we are in cooperation with the charter school so that a barrier to transportation is not created. And I can say that we have done that in every case when a charter school had transitioned into transporting their own students. And to give you some examples of what we can do for the charter schools that we are currently providing transportation for. Sorry, these pages are sticking together. The district currently has 64 surplus school buses that, when parked, were operational. They are running. And so a charter school has the opportunity that if a district marks anything as surplus, they have the opportunity to take that equipment. And so those are marked surplus. We would normally sell those on govdeals.com or another site and receive anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 per bus. So those actually could be given to those charter schools to help get them started with those. We also had 24 other buses that had some type of mechanical issue. We could look at what those mechanical issues were and then see if it's in the best interest to repair those and get them back on the road. Understanding these buses are older, because we're not parking 10-year-old buses, we're parking 15-year-old buses. But understanding these buses are older, they do meet Florida specs, and the district would do the initial school bus inspection to make sure that bus is road worthy to transport students to and from school. We can also contact our local bus vendors, the charter schools, the options of whether they can buy, lease, and new or used school buses. You know, based on those topics that I just mentioned, we feel strongly that that would prevent any type of barrier and give equal access to all students residing within a reasonable distance of the charter school as defined in the charter. So by helping them get started, that would not be a barrier for them. During this process, we also surveyed other districts. The majority of the districts we surveyed do not provide charter transportation. There were some cases where they were district-owned charter or district-operated charter, and they provided transportation for that. And then there was a collegiate program that they provided transportation for. Some possible savings that we could generate could be anywhere around $130,000. That is strictly eliminating 4 buses and 4 driver positions. But something that we can't put a cost on is the service that we would enhance and increase at the district schools by not serving 12 other charter schools, by reallocating those services to district schools and making sure that the students that we're charged to educate are on school, are in class on time, getting educated, instead of having continuous late buses. Now, when I say continuous, are they every single day at every single school? No, but there's enough that it is an issue that we have to address. Equity, the district, I feel the district needs to offer the, services, equally to the other charter schools. And so by providing some charter schools with and some charter schools without, we need to make a decision to, treat each charter school the same and allow them to go into the transportation with our assistance. The other charter schools, like I said before, were very successful, and I think the charter schools that we do have, that we are transporting, could be successful as well. There are charter school programs such as McKeel, Lake Wells Charter School, that could absorb some of these schools and receive the FTE funding that we currently receive. So I think looking at it at a broad picture and working with charter schools that are currently doing the transportation, we could help these other charter schools get off the ground. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Belcher to give you some other reasons why this would make sense for the district.
Good afternoon. Along with what Mr. Davis mentioned about removing charter school transportation, with the addition of Citrus Ridge Academy and additional magnet schools just this past year, along with a larger number of magnet students that we're transporting, eliminating charter school transportation will help us provide better service for our students that we are required to transport. It will free up buses for use in transporting students in higher populated areas, especially on the east side of the county where there's been a higher population growth. Since the 2013-2014 year, we've had an increase in transportation of approximately 1,100 students. On the east side, we feel that removing charter school transportation in that area will free up some of those buses to accommodate that increase. It will also help reduce the time and mileage on many of our bus routes. In some cases, 20 to 30 minutes and possibly 10 to 15 miles on some routes. We currently have routes that start prior to 5 a.m. and some that end after 6 p.m. So we're hoping that that will help in that aspect to maybe get students home a little quicker. We're hoping that it will help reduce late bus arrivals. That's been a major issue for our students and staff. That's a major issue there that we want to help with. It will reduce student numbers on our buses, which will help reduce discipline issues. Many of our buses have students sitting 3 to a seat, and especially with some of our longer magnet and charter routes, when they're sitting 3 to a seat, there are some discipline issues that come with that. But that is one issue that hopefully would help with. Removing charter school transportation will reduce the number of schools that are supported, allowing our area managers to concentrate on providing on-time and more efficient transportation for our schools. And as stated previously, it may also allow us to reduce the number of school bus positions for cost savings, or it may reduce the number of bus driver positions that we may need in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Belcher. Now transitioning into the elimination of some under 2 mile transportation. And Florida Administrative Code 6A-3 basically outlines who is eligible for transportation and who isn't. And in a nutshell, students that live more than 2 miles away from their assigned school are eligible for transportation. Or students with pre-K students with disabilities and other students with IEPs are eligible for that transportation as well. Students living less than that and not having any of those other criteria do not receive or not eligible for that transportation services. We have in the past provided those services. We call it space available transportation, meaning that we have available seats on the school buses and that we can add a student as long as they get to a stop outside of 2 miles. We also have a courtesy, what we call a courtesy transportation, where we provide transportation for teachers that may go into a high school and then their students or their children are transported from that high school to their zone school. But that zone school is outside of the 2 miles, and in the afternoon they would go home to that school, so we could claim FTE for those students. So our objective in removing the ineligible students is to improve efficiency for on-time performance. This means that students would be more likely to arrive at school on time. It would improve relations between the department and schools by providing better level of service to our students entitled to transportation and their parents. We understand, Polk County Public Schools understand that students who are ineligible for transportation face circumstances that bus students don't. So to help alleviate those circumstances, the school board would work closely with all city, county, and state agencies by cooperating to identify potential unsafe pedestrian situations. The various agencies, with the various agencies to try to correct these situations in a timely manner. They can help provide the construction of sidewalks, furnishing crossing guards, establishing student crosswalks, and increasing law enforcement diligence to enhance the safety of students who may use pedestrian routes to and from school each day. There is also a corporation or a program called Safe Routes to School. And Safe Routes to School has a ton of literature that shows, you know, different agencies you can work with to make sure that students that are walking are getting there safely. There's also the walking school bus that you can implement with parents, and parents to actually take turns and say, okay, I'll take this group this week, you can take the group next week, kind of like carpooling except walking. And it's considered the walking school bus. I think by collaborating with parents and government agencies, the school board will continue to promote increased safety for all students. Some statistics on the under 2 mile is we currently have 3,400 students that we are transporting who live under 2 miles and we do not receive funding for. 171 are high school students, 615 are middle school students. The largest population is the elementary students, which is 2,574 based on October's count. We would recommend, we have slotted that 406 students would no longer receive transportation for the 2019-20 school year at the elementary level. And the reason those are slotted to not receive that service is because they have been heavily vetted through our safety department. So meaning our safety department has gone to those sites, evaluated them. There have been sidewalks that may have been added, and I'll use Wendell Watson as an example. Wendell Watson had a large portion of sidewalks poured so that students living in the neighborhood could utilize those sidewalks and walk to school. However, we're still transporting those students from neighborhoods within 2 miles. So those are the type of students and the type of areas that we are looking at. We would continue to look at the other 20 students or more to make sure that before we remove any service that they are vetted, that we are making sure that they're not crossing a major thoroughfare. And the last thing we want is to put an elementary child in danger. So, yes, ma'am.
So what is you said 406 elementary, so what is the total charter school and or within 2 mile?
Yes, ma'am. I'll get.
Are you getting there? Okay,
Yes,
sorry.
ma'am. So no, it's a good question because secondary education does not fall under hazardous walking criteria whatsoever. So we would eliminate secondary, which that total number between secondary and primary elementary students is 1,192 students with 350 charter school students. That'd be
Included in that or in addition to
in
that?
addition to that number.
350?
Yes, ma'am.
And how many total again? How many total?
1,192.
1,192.
Yes, sir.
So middle and high school.
And then
Just a general thing, I mean, can we get some of this reduced to a one-pager or something like that at some point where we have the numbers that we can look at? It's kind of hard to process
Yes.
that just verbally, so, I mean, after you're done.
we can do that. We can do some bullet points.
Like a fact sheet.
Yes, that would be helpful.
Yes.
The 1,192 kids, that would include all the teachers' kids that are,
No, ma'am.
No.
no, okay.
One of the things that we would continue to look at is
These are just the under 2 mile.
courtesy, right, yes. ma'am.
Okay, gotcha.
The courtesy transportation that we provide some of our teachers. throughout the county. And I can tell you that has been, they would have to leave school early or arrive to school late. And I think that service is, is very productive for the
Just
district.
check.
The Florida statutes that cover all this is 1006.21. Hazardous walking is 1006.23. We can provide all this in a bulleted point, Mr. Townsend. And there is a possible savings there as well, around $200,000 if we were able to eliminate 6 buses and drivers. Now, and again, you can't put a cost on the service that we could increase by removing close to 2,100 students or however many students. 1,500 students.
1,500
students. Currently being transported, and focus on those students that are eligible for transportation, and get the students to school on time and home in a decent hour. Yes,
Ms. Reynolds, then Ms. Miller.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Are you still going, or are you done? I just didn't wanna ask a question you're gonna answer in 30 seconds.
He's got one more portion, but I'm done.
Do you wanna go first?
You can go ahead.
Okay, I just, of the 406 students that are elementary, what type of is that, they live across the street from the school, or are some of them actually 1.9 miles that, there's a long way to walk for a
The
5-year-old?
1.9 miles, and by statute, they don't qualify
Right,
for transportation. We've looked at those very, very heavily, and so those are some of the space available courtesy rides that don't provide any other additional resources, other than it affecting our average bus occupancy through the funding process, that we could possibly put them on a bus if a seat was available, if they live 1.9 miles and could get to a stop outside of the 2 miles. The students that we are talking about are students that live well within that 2 miles. That actually can see the school from their residence, and often play near the school on the weekends. So.
okay, that was really my question is, are they across the street from the school, or are they, I don't necessarily wanna see a 5 or 6 year old walking 2 miles
Right.
to school and 2 miles home every day. Seems insane, even if statute doesn't think so.
I understand that.
Okay.
Ms. Miller?
And this is kind of two-part, I probably have multiple questions. This is two factions, we're talking about charter and the 2 mile radius kind of under one umbrella. In that fact sheet you give us, can you give us the schools we're not gonna serve, the charter?
Yes, ma'am, I have a list of those. I didn't read it out because I don't want to run over the
No.
timeframe.
And I have a question about that. We do receive FTE, I know we do for one of the charters. Victory Ridge, which houses children with developmental disabilities, we receive their FTE dollars for that. I don't know if we make a profit on that, if that's a break even, or if we're losing dollars, FTE transportation. And I don't want this to turn into losing bus services because of liability issues.
No,
So,
I agree with that.
Well, these buses that you're talking about are available. Number one, is Victory Ridge included in that, which I'm sure they are because they're a charter. And the buses that are available, is that gonna be something offered to all of these 12 schools, or
Yes, ma'am.
then it's gonna have to be a board decision if they're gonna be donated or sold at a reduced rate or
Actually,
whatever?
the statute allows, the board has already voted for those buses to be surplus.
Okay.
And so, it wouldn't take a board action.
Have you had conversation with Victory Ridge about this?
I haven't had a conversation with anyone until we had this conversation.
Okay, because just for transporting medically fragile kids is a different scenario, so I wanna make sure that they feel comfortable, because when we had the accident last year, they had the accident in our bus. The first, community input was, you're gonna take our transportation.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that those children are still, they transport a long distance. So I just, as a board member who represents that population, no matter what school they're attending, I wanna make sure that that's a smooth transition, based on the need of that school. And so that's a different scenario other than the under 2 mile. I live near the Wendell Watson area, so I've seen the sidewalks being poured on those heavy curves, so I can hear the phones ringing already about the walking. And in the past, sitting in school board meetings, we've had parents come up, with concerns, you know, at the end of the meetings, based on, we talked about this before with removing transportation. When you name these programs like the walking school bus or these other government agencies, are we gonna appoint, is that gonna be the school's responsibility? Who are we gonna appoint to suggest, or is that just a suggestion we're making for parents who have no idea that exists?
Well, actually, we've had discussions, the superintendent, brought up a great idea when we first started these discussions, is we're, to make this a countywide
Initiative?
initiative.
Okay.
So we're talking about sheriff's departments, we're talking about local law enforcement, we're talking about, you know, school board employees, even maybe school board members. We wanna make sure that we have all the stakeholders at the table when, so that they understand and can communicate to the public why this transportation services are being taken away.
And then we have a point person for those phone calls. At the last board meeting, I remember people even bringing lists of sexual offenders in the area that within 2 miles of their school, and their children having to walk by those houses or those, you know, communities. So there'll be some kind of response team based on these agencies you're gonna partner with
Yes,
for
ma'am.
that.
And there's, the statute's clear on a sexual offender or a sexual predator. Now, to a parent, it doesn't matter.
Right,
A sexual offender, they feel, you know, their child shouldn't be walking past a sexual offender's home. A sexual offender could be in several different, but when it's a sexual predator, that's when the
that's the
district
statute.
has to make arrangements for transportation based on, or to make sure that that child is not walking within, and with anywhere near that home. And I can tell you, we provide, information, bus stop information to our sheriff's department every year, and when they're placing the sexual offenders and especially the sexual predators, they're not putting anywhere near a bus stop.
That's just from an experience as a community member sitting in a board meeting where that was an issue at one time. So, those are the two areas, as long as, the charter schools will be contacted and given the information on the possible, bus sales, because I don't know what I'm presuming these are the small charter schools, because the larger ones have transportation, making it available to them, so they don't feel like we're just dropping them for whatever reason, that's a
And that's why, that's why the superintendent wanted us to have this meeting now, so that we can start making those, communications and reaching out, so, we don't catch anyone
Right.
off guard and pull the rug out from anyone. That's the last thing we wanna do. We wanna work with the charter schools. We wanna help the transition, in a positive manner. And we wanna work with the other charter schools that are providing transportation and give them opportunities to maybe pick up the transportation, which they could pick up FTE funding for, so.
Mr. Townsend, then right, Mr. Wilson.
Sort of along the lines of the other government organizations, you know, Interest Connection, Polk Trant, Transit has very creative leadership. I know they're actually, I think, eager to help to the degree that they can. Don't know what is possible, but they seem to think there were some things that were possible, like making their first runs of the day, school runs, like their leadership knows the rules, and I hope that we're in contact with them regularly. I mean, and maybe we could pilot a program, like I know in Lakeland, for instance, the Parker Street neighborhood. Last time I checked, it's zoned for Lime Street or for Philip O'Brien,
Right.
and it's 1.8 miles away, and you're walking through a tricky area where there's not much light. That'd be a great place for like a pilot. We don't have to comprehensively. And I think there's a place in Winter Haven similar to that as well. I hope we're exploring those types of possibilities, and I know they'd be interested in doing that. So if we can facilitate that, would appreciate that.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, and I think anyone who knows me knows that I'm not adversarial to charter schools, but it occurs to me that what we're offering is that they should start transporting their students, and we're offering a bus to do that at no cost. They'll be responsible for finding someone to drive that bus, and they need pairs on the bus and things like that, picking up that cost, which we're now picking up. It just seems only fair and reasonable for us to pass that cost on to them, which is a part of doing business, it seems. So I would hope that those charter schools would be responsible enough to manage that process. And I agree with Mr. Townsend. I think there's some other creative solutions available to us out there, but I would hope they would, and there could be some smaller ones that simply can't, but generally, it seems to me, if I were starting a charter school, that would be something that I would think would be necessary to consider.
In the charter school, I think it was Learning and Literacy.
Language and literacy.
They actually took us up and got one of our surplus buses and started their transportation services with that.
Ms. Cunningham?
And the other thing, I agree with what everybody else has said, and in addition to that, I noticed that we're looking at doing this at the beginning of next school year. It's not like we're saying January 1 or March.
No.
And I know whenever we do these types of transitions, I can remember when we did the food service thing a few years back, and it's difficult for them to kind of get rolling. So I'm hoping this will give them enough time, but certainly if not, I would simply want to request that, I don't know what time frame is reasonable, because that's not what I do for a living every day. But if for some reason they couldn't get it together in 9 months, which I think is plenty of time, but it may not be, I don't know, that we would continue to work with them until such time as they would be able to ramp up with their own system. That's the only thing I would say.
And we have a letter that's why we wanted to give it to them early enough so that
Yes.
they have time to do
Enough
that.
time.
I think really technically they said 30 days, but I want to make sure they had enough time
Plenty.
and were willing to do have them
Yes.
have the bus as well. So I
Thank
saw
you.
a hand here and a hand, I don't know. That's somebody?
I
No?
think,
Okay, Ms.
I
Fields.
think it was Fields' first time.
Okay, sorry.
I'm concerned about the less than 2 miles. Example being Rock Ridge Road, we've had discussion about that before, and I wanna know, in a situation like that, when the parents and the students feel like it's not safe for them to walk that long distance, are we going to look at that as a case-by-case basis, or what are we thinking on that?
Yes, ma'am. And like I said, we have over 2,500 elementary students that are not eligible for transportation and do not meet hazardous walking. But we're only taking 406 students that we've done a lot of research on. So yes, we'll take every one of those in a case-by-case basis.
And not just necessarily elementary, but middle and high school, if it's not a safe
Right.
environment. And I think that's gonna be one of the things that we really need to make sure that we explain thoroughly.
And Ms. Fields, that's why we wanted to form the committee with not just, school board employees and members. We wanted to go outside and get, planning, people from the cities and then include the sheriff's office too, so that we can have that conversation of what are the areas and, what is hazardous in some aspects to them. It may not point out just by us looking at our definition of it.
Right.
So we can include them all in there. And looking at Citrus Connection, we'll put them on there so that we can hopefully, as a community come together and provide different options.
Because the Polk Transit Authority and the Citrus Connection and Winter Haven Area Transit, all of those working together may be able to solve some of these issues.
Mr. Town?
It's sort of along those lines. We've got some lead time on this. The charter thing makes sense. I think given the reality of the bigger issue is, we're 1,190 kids who, on the 2 mile issue, which has been vexing for a long time. I'm sure we all get those calls. Could we? It's first of all, it's one of those issues where we really need to be talking to the public about it as a challenge. Not we're going to stop doing this for you. It's we have these constraints based on the realities in state law, the realities of funding, the difficulties of hiring people. These are the constraints we face. Here are the responses we're going to make to that. here are some alternative creative things we're trying to do, and this is why I keep coming back to the Polk Transit thing. If we could demonstrate, set a goal to have one pilot program in place by the beginning of next school year, so we could demonstrate this is the creative thing we're doing, not just to take stuff away, but to create new stuff, and shows the public that we're thinking ahead, we're engaging people, and maybe that can't happen, but if we can make a determination on if something's possible before that, I think that would be very helpful. But the first notification of this that people are going to get is a letter that's very legal sounding. Doesn't even say I'm sorry. It probably should say we're really sorry about this. But we have to flip that conversation around so that people understand why we're doing things and what we're doing to make it less bureaucratic and capricious feeling. If that makes sense.
Mr. Wilson.
And I've shared my thoughts about the charter issue. I also want to echo the thoughts of my colleagues about the 2 mile issue as well. I think especially as it relates to elementary school children, that's a long way for kids to walk. And there are a lot of perils along the way. So I'm in agreement with that. I would like, since we have the press here, I would like to reiterate that over the past decade or so, we've lost roughly $30 million in PICO funding from the state, $50 million in rollbacks and millage rates, and over a little bit longer period of time than that, over $30 million a year in lottery funds. So $110 million a year. At some point in time, I think the state's got to realize that it's going to have to come to the conclusion that education is important to our society and to our state, and they're going to have to step up to the plate. These are challenges we face because of financial issues that we have. So I think we have to keep sending that message to our state legislators as well.
And Mr. Wilson, a good point there too is in transportation funding from the state, that has not increased significantly since 1998. The transportation funding is not increasing with inflation. It's not increasing with fuel prices. It's simply, it may be a few dollars here and a few dollars there, but it drops up and down. So,
And we could serve a lot of students and a lot of needs with $110 million a year, right?
That would be helpful to see on I'm sure you've got a graphic somewhere of that. It's probably in the budget. I don't remember seeing it, but if you could break that out to transportation, that would be helpful.
Ms. Reynolds?
I know this is a sample letter and you talked a little bit about that, but if we could, when we send this out, include in that letter, these are some of the options that you have, and not just these are the options, but also this is the phone number for it, or this is the website to find out more information on a walking school bus or those types of things. Cause I think that will help with them all calling the district and somebody answering and saying, I don't really know where to direct you. But just to kind of give them direction of this is where you need to go, this is where you need to call for questions, so that.
I'm glad you brought it up because we actually met with Hillsborough County, who went through this last year with the under 2 mile students, and they gave us sound ideas, and working with Ms. Pleasant and her team, creating some informational links, as well as forms that say, please check out this area that's under 2 miles before any services are taken away. So I agree. We need to educate the public as much as possible and provide all those resources.
And for that under 2 mile radius, I just, along the lines of what Mrs. Reynolds said, I just don't want to leave it up to the sites to decide to get involved in those programs, because then you're going to have the frustrated parents waiting on approval from their school principal or whomever. Like if it's going to be an initiative from the district, it needs to be, a contact for them at their school that will have this information, and it's not really an optional kind of thing. Because if it's a city program that we're just going to suggest, and we have to get each school to buy into it on their own individually, it needs to be succinct across the district. We will be providing this. This is an initiative. This is a pilot program. Not really leaving it up to just others to decide, because we're going to get different responses.
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
I thought we were gonna hear about the bus drivers and the meetings and stuff. In what?
No, we met with them, these are,
Oh, I
they
thought
gave
we were getting
suggestions.
Oh, that was their suggestion.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes,
we
we-
meet them
that
with
was-
them.
Pretty good.
And actually, one section of that Mr. Belcher was going to discuss, I know we're the time constraint.
One quick last thing to add to
Send it to them.
this discussion is, and I know this is particularly an issue in like Wales, and hopefully it'll be part of our ongoing discussions, but when a kid who ought to be in Lake Wales High or is bused a long way away, I think there are probably other situations like that elsewhere in town, and I think those would be good things to look at as well from our side, and I don't know if there's a way to, I know they're more than 2 miles away, so we're required to, I don't know if there's any kind of agreement to be studied there, so just want to throw that in there as well.
Yes, and that's something that, the opt-out programs from Lake Wells, where if you live in one section of the town, you go to Winter Haven. If you live in another section of the town, you go to Frostproof. If you live in another section of the town, you go to Bartow. Those create some logistical opportunities, to say the least. And then opportunities on top of that, which I know that some of that you can't control, but if you're a kindergartner and you go into a school that, and then the school that you're zoned for makes the grades and they're back on track and maybe an A school, that student is eligible to stay in there for the entire, grade levels that it has, so.
Right, so I'd just be curious what our options, if any, are on restricting that kind of travel. So.
Mr. Wilson?
And just very quickly, I understand that our state legislators want to provide for school choice. It sounds like a good thing, it sounds like a good idea, and I have no problem with that. But I think a far less costly option and more practical option is simply to put money into our local community schools so that they're good schools, and folks don't want their kids to go somewhere else. In addition to the cost of busing, we have the fact that those kids have to get up at 4 in the morning, and that's a huge stress. So I would hope that at some point in time, they understand all of the costs involved in what we're trying to do at the state level and why it's not working. But just very quickly, tell us how many miles we drive in transporting students every day. Do you have that off the top of your head?
61,000 miles a day.
61,000 miles a day.
And I can tell you, this initiative or this is not something that is easy for transportation to, or support services transportation to go through, because as a father, when I'm trying to be told that my child who's in first grade should walk 1.8 miles to the school that they're assigned, I get it. I get the issues there, and when we get those phone calls, that's unfortunately what people have to see in some of those cases.
Mr. Belcher, do you have anything burning that you need to get out?
Nothing else, really, we were just talking about, out of zone transportation, in which you touched on there, so, because that is very challenging out of normal zone transportation, so, and that's one of the issues why we're here too, so, to hopefully alleviate some of the issues we have with under 2 mile and charter schools, that we could hopefully help out in those areas with those that are, we're transporting out of zone, so.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item you have is Mr. Perone with the financial